Imagine being millions of miles away from home, and your biggest enemy isn't radiation or a vacuum. It's your lunch. Most people think space food is just a cool novelty, dry ice cream and silver pouches, but the truth is much more dangerous. In the early days of exploration, NASA realized that a simple mistake during a meal could lead to a total mission failure. We aren't just talking about a mess in zero-G. We're talking about catastrophic hardware risks that keep engineers awake at night. But why is the act of eating so restricted in orbit? And why do astronauts eventually lose their interest in food altogether, threatening their very survival? Today, we are going beyond the pouches to reveal the hidden engineering and the biological weirdness of eating in the stars. Because trust me, space food is definitely not what you think, and the reason why might just change how you look at your next meal. To understand how dangerous this is, we have to go back to 1961. When Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, scientists weren't even sure if a human could swallow without gravity. They feared the food might get stuck in his throat or float into his lungs. His meal, pureed meat and chocolate sauce squeezed from tubes that looked like toothpaste. It was functional, but it was miserable. As the missions got longer, the problem got bigger. During the Gemini and Apollo eras, NASA's solution was freeze-drying. Technicians would remove all the water from the food, and astronauts had to inject water back into the bags using a special needle. Imagine trying to enjoy a cocktail of dry cubes and lukewarm water while floating in a tin can. But it wasn't just about the taste. It was about physics. On Earth, if you drop a cracker, it falls to the floor. In space, that cracker turns into hundreds of tiny projectiles. Every crumb becomes a bullet that can fly into an astronaut's eye or, even worse, drift behind a control panel and cause a short circuit in the electrical system. This is why, for decades, NASA banned bread and anything that could crumble. They had to reinvent the very nature of what food is. But as they solved the engineering side, they stumbled upon a much weirder problem. One that was happening inside the astronauts' own bodies. While engineers were fighting crumbs, the astronauts' bodies were fighting the food itself. You see, the moment you reach microgravity, your blood and fluids don't stay in your legs anymore. They rush to your upper body and head. This is what NASA calls the puffy face effect. Imagine having the worst flu of your life permanently. Your nasal passages swell up, and your sense of smell almost disappears. And since 80% of what we perceive as flavor actually comes from our nose, space food suddenly tastes like nothing. It's like eating wet cardboard. This created a massive problem for mission doctors. Astronauts started losing weight rapidly because they simply didn't want to eat. To combat this, NASA had to get aggressive with spices. This is why shrimp cocktail is the most famous meal in space history. Not because it's fancy, but because the horseradish is strong enough to actually punch through the congestion and make them feel something. But there's a darker side to this biological shift. It's not just about taste, it's about social survival. In a cramped station where you smell the same recycled air and see the same people for 6 months, the loss of a good meal leads to extreme irritability and depression. NASA realized that if they wanted to get to Mars, they couldn't just provide nutrients. They had to provide comfort. They started experimenting with things that seemed impossible in a vacuum, like baking fresh cookies or growing lettuce in LED-powered chambers. But as they tried to bring the Earth to the stars, they discovered the final, most shocking truth about what it really takes to eat in the deep dark of space. As we set our sights on Mars, the luggage problem becomes impossible. You can't pack 3 years' worth of pre-packaged pouches for a crew of 6. The weight alone would ground the mission. The solution: we have to stop being space scavengers and start being space farmers. On the International Space Station, astronauts are already using the veggie system, small, LED-lit chambers where they grow red romaine lettuce and zinnias. For the first time in history, humans are eating food that has never touched Earth's soil. But it's not just salad. Scientists are now experimenting with 3D printing meat. Using bovine cells, they've successfully printed small-scale steaks in microgravity. However, farming in a vacuum is a nightmare. Without gravity, water doesn't flow through roots. It sticks to them like a gel, potentially drowning the plant. Every calorie grown in orbit is a victory of human ingenuity over the laws of physics. But even with high-tech steak printers and hydroponic gardens, there was one thing NASA didn't expect. The most important part of space food isn't the vitamins or the calories. It's something far more human. And as we prepare for the longest journeys in history, this final realization is changing everything. So what is the one thing NASA didn't expect? It's the fact that in the cold, sterile void of space, a meal is the only thing that still feels like Earth. Psychologists have discovered that for an astronaut, the dinner table is the most important piece of equipment on the entire station. In a place where you are constantly surrounded by wires, metal, and the threat of a vacuum, food is your only sensory connection to your home planet. This is why, despite the incredible technology of 3D printers and lab-grown meat, the most successful food on the ISS isn't a scientific breakthrough. It's the taco. Why? Because a tortilla doesn't make crumbs, solving the engineering problem. But more importantly, it allows the crew to build something together. When astronauts from different countries sit down to share a meal, the mission stops being about technical data and starts being about human connection. We often think of space travel as a journey of metal and fire. But as we look toward Mars, we're realizing that the biggest challenge isn't just keeping the body fueled, it's keeping the mind sane. A fresh tomato grown in a small LED box isn't just a source of vitamin C, it's a reminder of the smell of rain, the feel of soil, and the life we left behind. In the end, space food is not what you think because it's not actually space food at all. It is a desperate, beautiful attempt to bring a piece of our world into a place where life shouldn't exist. When we finally send the first humans to another planet, they won't just be carrying fuel and oxygen. They'll be carrying the flavors of home. And that is the most vital technology of all. Because no matter how far we go into the stars, we will always be hungry for a little bit of Earth. If you enjoyed this and want to explore more of the universe, make sure to subscribe. There's a lot more coming.